What's going on, guys? This is Foresight Capital, and today I wanted to talk about Palantir's price action for the day as well as ARK Invest buying and selling operations over the past week. So Palantir today closed at $25.10 per share, which was up just over 1.5%, and in aftermarket hours is now trading at $25.02 per share. Now on Monday I made a video stating that I sold all of my Palantir shares at $26.51 per share for just a slight profit on the overall trade and was looking to re-enter around $24.60 per share or as low as $22.60 depending on how the price action ended up. We saw a pullback to $24.60 on Tuesday and used it as support yet again before having a bit of a bounce today and then a pullback in afternoon hours. So we're going to talk about all of that price action as well as where I'm looking to rebuy the stock now and ARK Invest buying and selling operations. All that I ask is that if this video brings you value, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing because it really helps this channel reach more people. So on Tuesday afternoon, we saw yet again a pretty big wide candle during the beginning of market hours where we saw an initial spike to $25.87 before a pullback to right around the $24.60 support level, which is indicated by this yellow line. Now we've been using this level as support and resistance for quite some time. If we go back to the end of November, we can see that we used $24.60 as resistance before breaking above it with conviction on a big green candle and continuing the rally off to all-time highs, and then fading back down with a very quick downtrend after Citron Research's report came out that they had a much lower price target for Palantir, and then used it on the bounce from the long-term support line that we just recently broke as resistance yet again at $24.60 before again breaking above it with conviction and heading up to about $31 per share. We've been using $24.60 as support for some time now as well. So on every failed breakout of the $27.70 per share price target, we've seen a pullback to $24.60 as support, and this time was just the same, seeing yet another pullback to $24.60 on Tuesday before having a bit of a spike this morning up to the $26 per share range, which has been recent support and is now acting as resistance, and we failed to break above 26, pushing us yet again back towards $24.60. So what I'm expecting for tomorrow's price action is a continuation of this pullback to $24.60. And what I would ideally like to see in order to buy this stock again is a breakdown all the way to $22.60. Now I know a lot of you don't believe in technical analysis who follow this channel and are just interested in the news. So we'll talk about ARK Invest because they've actually been selling Palantir recently, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I wanted to talk a little bit about an article that I saw in the Motley, and it's talking about the catalyst for Palantir. So Palantir has been only spiking really recently on news, and if there's no news in the market, there's been a lot of selling. It's not got retail traders very hyped up on any given day to actually buy the stock, and we've seen a lot of institutional selling as well. So this Motley Fool article actually talks about the contracts that have been pumping the stock for the past couple of days. Now, Palantir and analysts expect their revenue to increase by about 44% to $1.07 billion this year, and then another 32% to $1.4 billion for next year. Next year's revenue is inclusive of about $145 million in recent contracts that were announced, which were actually extensions of major contracts that they already had. And it goes on to mention that while that's a significant boost to their revenue for next year, it's very likely that Palantir's management had already baked some of, if not all of the revenue from those deals into their predictions for next year. So while we're expected to see revenue rise by 32%, a lot of traders are expecting that $1.4 billion target that's been given for next year's revenue didn't actually include this $145 million. But Motley Fool at least believes that the management had likely already incorporated some of, if not all of, this $145 million into those projections, meaning that a lot of the trading action that has been going on in the stock was based on basically a 10% increase in estimated revenue that may or may not have already been accounted for. if that's the case and it had already been accounted for in the revenue, which there's really no way to know as a retail trader exactly what revenue they were counting in their projections, then the run-ups that were caused by these particular contract announcements may not have as meaningful of an impact on the stock's market cap and revenue projections for the next year. And that could lead to some potential institutional selling, as well as retail traders being a bit more scared, not only because of the potential lockup sell-off that could happen over the coming months, but also because the potential projected revenue is not going to be as high for the next year. Now I'm going to take a look at lucidtracking.com here, which follows ARK Invest buying and selling operations. You can find all this same information on ARK Invest website, and I'm not affiliated with Lucid Tracking in any way, but I think that it's a really great website to show the buying and selling operations in an easy to read format. So we can see here that ARK Invest actually sold $180,000 worth of Palantir on December 29th. They haven't sold Palantir at all since the middle of November, where they had basically one day that they sold a couple of dollars worth of Palantir, about $58,000, and then a few other red days where they sold right around $500. We saw selling action of $77 total on December 28th, but we saw $180,000 worth of sales from ARK Invest ARK W ETF on December 29th. Now what we can see here is that they're actually decreasing their overall weight of Palantir within their portfolio. So if we go back to the beginning of November, we can see that they had as little as 1/100% worth of Palantir in their ARK W portfolio and quickly built that up to well over 0.5%, reaching a high of 0.75% of the ARK W ETF, and have since then let the total weighting dwindle. What that tells me as a retail trader is that ARK W and ARK Invest is leaning towards the potential for Palantir returns to not be there, at least in the short term, because they do have massive inflows for these ARK Invest ETFs, and when they're not buying a consistent level of Palantir with their purchases and are instead actually selling and letting the weight dwindle, that means that they don't have as much faith and are taking a bit of that risk off of the table, that potentially it either has negative returns or not as great of returns as they're expecting for a return on their invested capital. So this is the first couple of trading days that we've actually seen ARK Invest selling shares of Palantir over the past month to month and a half worth of trading. What that means is that potentially they're seeing a bit of a pullback in the price. Now I highly doubt that they're using the same technicals as we are, but I'm looking for a continuation of this pullback, because once the news gets out that companies are starting to sell Palantir and that the returns may not be as high, at least in the very short term, that means that these companies are taking some of the risk off of the table and potentially looking to enter at a better price or stay away altogether. Now I haven't really seen any major news from Palantir over the past couple of days, so I'm thinking that this could be either part of a rebalance or them just taking some of the risk off of the table and looking to enter possibly after the potential sell-off from the lockup period expiring, which is due to expire sometime in the middle of February after the Q4 earnings. So it'll be very interesting to follow this over the next couple of days, but my thoughts are that we see a continuation of this pullback to at least 2460 for a retest, and potentially a breakdown below that level, in which case the next level of interest, at least for my personal trading, would be 2260 per share. I don't know that we'll see that much more of a sell-off, at least in the short term, unless there's some sort of negative news that comes out, or unless some of these ETFs and mutual funds that have invested in Palantir start selling it very heavily. So that's just kind of my thoughts on the day. Again, I am still bullish on Palantir, but I'm looking for a much better entry price. I sold at $26.50, and I'm looking realistically to enter closer to $24.60 or $22.60, but want to protect my capital on the way down rather than adding to a losing position. So I hope that this video brought you some value and showed you that some of the ETFs look to be starting to actually sell off Palantir. Hopefully it's just for a potential rebalance or for a better entry level, but potentially they don't see as much growth promise in Palantir as they once thought. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments on whether or not these companies are selling just to protect their overall profits from the trade so far, or whether or not they're trying to get out altogether. I appreciate you watching by. Thanks for stopping by, and catch you in the next one.